Blood is thicker than water. That's the lie they sell you. My parents sold the roof over my head, literally, to keep my felon sister out of jail. I slept in a freezing sedan while she walked free. So, I found the evidence she hid, and I handed it to the feds. The packing tape screeched as I pulled it across the top of a cardboard box. It was a harsh, ugly sound that echoed off the bare walls of the living room. I pressed the tape down with my thumb, feeling the rough ridges of the cardboard. You don't have to pack everything today, Chloe. The buyer said we have until Monday. I didn't look up at my mother. Diane stood in the doorway of the kitchen, her hands nervously wringing the strap of her leather purse. She was wearing her sympathetic face, brows pulled together, mouth turned down at the corners. It was a look she usually reserved for news stories about natural disasters, or when my older sister, Brittany, got dumped by a boyfriend she had spent 6 months cheating on. The buyers, I repeated. The words felt like broken glass in my throat. I grabbed another empty box, snapping it open with a sharp flick of my wrists. The cash buyers who flip houses. The ones you sold Grandma Helen's house to, underneath me. Chloe, please. My father, Robert, stepped up behind her. He wouldn't look at me directly. His eyes kept darting to the floorboards, the original oak floorboards. I had spent 3 weeks sanding and staining last summer. We didn't have a choice. You know what the lawyer said. Brittany's bail was set at $800,000. The bondsman needed 80 grand in cash and collateral to cover the rest. We couldn't put up our own house. If something went wrong, your mother and I would be on the street. So instead, I'm on the street. I dropped the tape dispenser. It clattered against the wood. The silence that followed was heavy and thick. This house had belonged to my grandmother. When she passed away 2 years ago, the deed legally transferred to my parents. But the house was a wreck. Black mold in the bathroom, a sagging roof, a furnace that belonged in a museum. My parents had wanted to let it go to tax auction. I begged them to let me fix it up. I sank $35,000 of my own savings, every dime I made working graveyard shifts at a data entry firm, into making it livable. We had a verbal agreement. Fix it, pay the property taxes, and when you're ready to take on a mortgage, we'll transfer the deed to you. I paid the taxes. I fixed the roof. I made it a home. And then Brittany got arrested. You're single. You have a good job, my mother said, her voice dropping into that placating, reasonable tone that made me want to scream. You can find an apartment. You're strong, Chloe. You're so resourceful. Brittany, she wouldn't survive in a county jail, not even for a week. She's fragile. Fragile. Brittany was 30 years old. She drove a leased Range Rover and drank $18 martinis. She was also, according to the federal government, the architect of a $2 million wire fraud and embezzlement scheme that had gutted the medical supply company she managed. The FBI had raided her luxury apartment on a Tuesday. By Thursday, my parents had contacted a predatory real estate investment firm. By Friday, Grandma Helen's house was sold for 60 cents on the dollar. They didn't even tell me until the check cleared. I have $200 in my checking account, I said, my voice dead flat. I put my last paycheck into replacing the water heater in the basement, a water heater that now belongs to a corporate flipping company. We'll pay you back, my father muttered. When? I snapped, finally looking at him. When, Dad? You just drained your retirement to pay Brittany's defense retainer. You sold this house to pay her bail. You have nothing left. He didn't answer. He just looked away again. I grabbed a trash bag and started sweeping the contents of the kitchen junk drawer into it. Batteries, takeout menus, spare keys. Get out, I said quietly. Chloe, don't be like this, my mother pleaded, reaching a hand out. We're family. We have to stick together when things get hard. Get out of my house. It's not your house, my father said. It slipped out before he could stop it. A defensive reflex. I froze. I looked at the man who raised me. The man who taught me how to ride a bike, who clapped when I graduated college with honors while Brittany dropped out to date a club promoter. He looked terrified of his own words, but he didn't take them back. You're right, I said. My chest felt hollowed out, scooped clean with a rusty spoon. It's not. I'll be gone by tonight. They left. They didn't offer to help me load my car. They didn't offer me their spare bedroom. Brittany was currently occupying it, recovering from the trauma of spending 48 hours in a holding cell. By midnight, everything I owned was crammed into my 2014 Honda Civic. The back seat was a mountain of garbage bags filled with clothes. My pots and pans were wedged into the footwells. The trunk was tied down with a bungee cord over a box of books. I parked at the far edge of a 2-4-hour Walmart parking lot. The yellow glow of the sodium lights cast long, distorted shadows across the asphalt. I reclined the driver's seat as far back as it would go. It wasn't far enough. The steering wheel crowded my knees. I pulled a fleece blanket out of a bag and pulled it over my head. The interior of the car was already freezing. It was mid-October, and the night air seeped through the glass, settling into my bones. I lay there, listening to the distant rumble of trucks on the highway. I thought about the bedroom I had painted sage green. I thought about the down comforter I had to leave behind because it took up too much space. And then I thought about Brittany, sleeping on a memory foam mattress in our parents' guest room, wrapped in Egyptian cotton, out on bail. I didn't cry. Crying was a luxury for people who had a warm place to wipe their face. Instead, I just lay there in the cold, feeling a cold, hard knot of absolute hatred take root in my chest. Homelessness doesn't look like what you think it does. It's not just sleeping on a sidewalk. It's a full-time, exhausting logistical nightmare. I woke up on my 5th morning in the Civic with a sharp, stabbing pain in my neck. My breath had plumed in the cold air overnight and formed a thin layer of condensation on the inside of the windows. I sat up, frantically wiping down the glass with the sleeve of my sweater so no passing security guard would realize someone was sleeping inside. My routine was a military operation. 6:00 a.m. Drive to the cheap $15 a month gym on the other side of town. 6:15 a.m. Sneak my work clothes into the locker room in a duffel bag. Shower quickly in lukewarm water, trying not to look at the dark circles forming under my eyes in the mirror. 7:30 a.m. Buy a burnt coffee from a gas station to warm my hands. 8:30 a.m. Walk into the mid-level corporate logistics firm where I worked as a data analyst, sit at my cubicle, and pretend my entire life hadn't evaporated. "Morning, Chloe," my manager, Dave, chirped as he walked past with a box of pastries. "You look tired. Rough weekend?" "Just didn't sleep well," I replied, pulling up a spreadsheet. "Tell me about it." My golden retriever kept whining at the back door, kept me up till 2. It's a nightmare. I forced a smile. "Sounds rough." I smelled like stale air and cheap dry shampoo. My back ached from the contours of the car seat. I had eaten cold peanut butter out of a jar for dinner the night before. But I nodded and typed, because if I lost this job, the car went next. And if the car went, I truly had nothing. While I was formatting data cells, Brittany was dominating the local news cycle. She had been a regional director for a massive medical supply vendor. Over 3 years, she had allegedly set up shell companies, billing her employer for thousands of non-existent MRI machine components. The feds were claiming she routed the money through offshore accounts to fund a lifestyle that included VIP tables in Vegas, a closet full of Birkin bags, and a luxury condo downtown. My parents' narrative was entirely different. She trusted the wrong accountant my mother had posted on Facebook just days before they evicted me. "Our family is under attack. Brittany is a victim of corporate scapegoating." My phone vibrated on my desk. The caller ID flashed. "Mom." I stared at it for a long time. I hadn't spoken to them since the day I packed my boxes. I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, a text popped up. "Chloe, I know you're upset, but we need a huge favor. Brittany has a mandatory check-in with federal pretrial services downtown at 2 p.m. Dad is at work and my car is making a weird noise. She can't take an Uber. People recognize her from the news. Can you take a long lunch and drive her?" I read the text 3 times. The sheer, blinding audacity of it made my vision blur. I gripped the edges of my desk, my knuckles turning white. I typed out a response. "I live in my car, Mom." I stared at the words. Then I hit backspace, deleting them all. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of my suffering. I typed a single word. No. My phone immediately rang again. I silenced it and flipped it face down. After work, I didn't know where to go. I had overstayed my welcome at the Walmart lot. A security guard had knocked on my window the night before, shining a flashlight into my eyes and telling me I had to move along. I found myself driving down familiar streets without realizing it. I turned onto Elm Avenue and slowed down. Grandma Helen's house was gone. I hit the brakes, pulling over to the curb. Where the two-story colonial had stood, there was now a gaping, muddy hole in the ground. A bright yellow bulldozer sat idle on the torn-up lawn. The developer hadn't even bothered to flip it. The lot was zoned for multifamily. They had demolished the house to build a triplex. The front porch where I had drank iced tea last summer. The kitchen where I had peeled off 3 layers of floral wallpaper. The floorboards I had bled over. Erased. Turned into splintered wood and dumped into a landfill. All for $75,000 in cash. All to buy Brittany the privilege of sleeping in a real bed while she awaited trial. I rolled down the window. The smell of turned earth and diesel fuel drifted into the car. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't my mother. It was an unknown number. "Chloe, it's Britt. Mom said you're pissed. Look, I get it. They shouldn't have done what they did with the house. I feel terrible." I scoffed out loud, a harsh, ugly sound. A second text came through. "I want to make it right. Or at least help. I know you're probably broke right now. I have cash. Real cash. Let me give you some. Meet me at the Silver Diner on 4th in an hour." I shouldn't have gone. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to block the number and drive away. But I looked at my gas gauge. It was hovering just above empty. My alternator was whining every time I pushed past 40 miles an hour. I was surviving on 89-cent cans of soup. Real cash. I put the car in drive and headed toward 4th Street. The Silver Diner smelled like old grease and bleached floors. I slid into a vinyl booth in the back, keeping my jacket zipped up to my chin. I felt hyper-visible, acutely aware of the greasy sheen in my hair and the wrinkles in my slacks. The bell above the door jingled, and Brittany walked in. Despite everything, she looked immaculate. She was wearing a camel-colored cashmere coat, oversized tortoiseshell sunglasses, and an expression of profound martyrdom. She had lost weight, her cheekbones looked sharp enough to cut glass, but her blowout was fresh. She spotted me, took off the sunglasses, and slid into the booth opposite me. She looked at me, really looked at me, and her nose wrinkled slightly. "God, Chloe, you look exhausted." "I sleep in a Honda Civic," I said flatly. "What do you want, Brittany?" She sighed, a long, theatrical exhalation. "Can we just be sisters for a minute? I'm going through hell right now. You have no idea what it's like. The feds took my passport. My accounts are frozen. The media is parked outside Mom and Dad's house." "You stole $2 million, I replied, keeping my voice low but razor sharp. "You bought a lake house in Tahoe with money meant for cardiac monitors. Excuse me if I don't bleed for you." "Allegedly," she hissed, leaning forward. "And it wasn't like that. It was a corporate oversight. My boss threw me under the bus." "Why am I here, Brittany?" She stopped. The facade cracked, just for a second, and I saw genuine panic in her eyes. It was the first real emotion I had seen from her in years. She looked around the diner. The waitress was wiping down the counter. An old man was reading a newspaper 3 booths down. Brittany reached into her oversized designer tote bag and pulled out a thick, white envelope. She pushed it across the table. "There's $3,000 in there," she whispered. "Untraceable. $100 bills." I stared at the envelope. My heart kicked against my ribs. $3,000 was a security deposit and first month's rent. It was an escape hatch. It was a bed. "What's the catch?" I asked, my voice betraying my desperation. "No catch. I need a favor." She reached into her tote again and pulled out a beaten-up black gym bag. It wasn't designer. It looked like something you'd buy at a thrift store. She set it on the floor next to my feet. "I need you to hold on to this for a little while." "What is it?" I pulled my feet back as if the bag were a coiled snake. "Just personal stuff," she said quickly. Too quickly. Journals, some old photos, stuff I don't want the FBI pawing through. My lawyer says they might execute a secondary search warrant on Mom and Dad's house next week. They're trying to squeeze me. I just need this stuff somewhere safe, somewhere they won't look. They don't know where I am, I muttered. Nobody does. Exactly. Brittany reached across the table and touched my hand. Her skin was warm. Please, Chloe. You're the only person I can trust. Mom and Dad are panicking. They'd handed over the second a badge knocked on the door. Just put it in your trunk. Forget. It's there. A month from now, I'll take it back and I'll give you another $5,000. I looked at the white envelope. Then I looked at the black bag on the floor. I knew she was lying. Brittany didn't keep journals. She barely read books. Whatever was in that bag was the reason she was terrified. Fine, I said, snatching the envelope off the table and shoving it into my coat pocket. 1 month. Thank you, she breathed, slumping back in the booth. You don't know what this means to me. Don't call me again, I said, grabbing the gym bag by the straps. It was heavier than it looked. I walked out of the diner without looking back. I got into my freezing car, locked the doors, and drove to a deserted commercial park on the edge of town. I parked behind an empty warehouse, cut the engine, and turned on the dome light. I pulled the envelope out of my pocket. I counted the money. 30 crisp $100 bills. I shoved it into my glove compartment and locked it. Then I hauled the black gym bag onto the passenger seat. Don't open it, a voice in my head warned. Just take the money, find an apartment, and stay out of it. But I thought about the bulldozer sitting on top of Grandma Helen's demolished house. I thought about the smell of my own unwashed skin. I thought about my mother telling me I was strong enough to be homeless. I unzipped the bag. There were no photos. There were no journals. There was a bulky, military-grade external hard drive, and beneath that, a thick, leather-bound moleskin notebook. I pulled the notebook out. The leather was worn at the corners. I opened it to the first page. It was completely filled with Brittany's loopy, distinct handwriting. My eyes scanned the lines. It wasn't a diary. It was a ledger. Octaven 14. Phantom vendor account hash for Global MedTech, $45,000 routed to Cayman offshore. Nav 2. Override code used for inventory deletion. $120K cleared. Passwords. She had written down the passwords to the encrypted hard drive. She had written down the routing numbers. She had written down the names of the executives she had manipulated to get the clearance codes. It was a masterclass in arrogance. She didn't trust digital files entirely, so she kept a hard copy, a physical trophy of her own brilliance. The feds only had the surface-level paper trail. They had enough to charge her, but maybe not enough to secure a massive sentence if she threw her boss under the bus. This notebook? This hard drive? It was the silver bullet. It proved she wasn't just a scapegoat. It proved she was the architect. It proved premeditation, execution, and concealment. I sat in the cold, dark cabin of my car, the yellow dome light casting a sickly glow over the damning pages. I traced my finger over the ink. Brittany thought I was a pathetic, loyal dog. She thought the trauma of losing my home had made me desperate enough to be her mule. My parents thought I would just fade into the background, absorbing the blow so their precious golden child could survive. I closed the notebook. The sound was like a gavel striking wood. I didn't start the car immediately. I sat there for a long time, watching my breath fog the windshield. The knot of hatred in my chest uncoiled, spreading out into something sharp, cold, and wonderfully clear. I pulled out my phone and searched for the number of the local FBI field office. The federal building downtown was a brutalist block of gray concrete that looked like a fortress. The lobby smelled like floor wax and stale air. I stood in front of the metal detector, the heavy black gym bag slung over my shoulder. The security guard, a burly man with a bored expression, pointed a thick finger at the conveyor belt. "Bag on the belt, ma'am. Empty your pockets." I placed the bag down. It bumped against the rubber rollers. I watched it pass through the X-ray machine, the silhouette of the hard drive and the ledger showing up in neon green on the guard's monitor. He didn't blink, he just pushed it down the line. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in a windowless room on the fourth floor. The chairs were cheap plastic, the kind that warp under your weight. A clock ticked on the wall. Every second felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. The door clicked open. A man walked in holding a legal pad. He wore a rumpled gray suit and had the tired, bloodshot eyes of someone who hadn't slept a full night in a decade. "Chloe?" He didn't offer his hand. He just pulled out the chair across from me and sat down. "I'm Special Agent Brooks, White Collar Crime Division." The receptionist said you had information regarding the Brittany fraud investigation. "I don't have information," I said. My voice sounded thin, raspy. I cleared my throat. "I have the whole thing." Brooks raised a skeptical eyebrow. He clicked his pen. "Okay, talk to me." I reached into the gym bag and pulled out the hard drive. I set it on the metal table. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud. Then, I pulled out the leather-bound ledger. I placed it perfectly square in the center of the table and slid it toward him. "What's this?" "My sister is arrogant," I said slowly. "She thinks she's the smartest person in any room. She thinks digital footprints can be erased, but she likes the physical proof of how clever she is. That notebook contains every offshore routing number, every phantom vendor account, and the passwords to that encrypted drive. The drive has the primary transaction logs." Brooks stared at me. The skepticism in his eyes vanished, replaced by a sharp, predatory focus. He reached out and opened the ledger to the middle. He read one page. Then he flipped to another. His breath hitched slightly. He looked up at me. "Where did you get this?" "She gave it to me yesterday. She asked me to hide it because she thought you were going to execute a secondary search warrant on our parents' house. And you're just handing it over." It wasn't a question. It was an assessment. He was trying to figure out my angle. "She paid me $3,000 to keep it," I said, keeping my gaze locked on his, "in cash, which I am keeping, because my parents sold my house to pay her bail, and I currently live in a Honda Civic." Brooks stopped writing on his legal pad. The silence in the interrogation room stretched out, thick and heavy. He looked at my wrinkled clothes, my unwashed hair, the dark, bruised-looking bags under my eyes. He didn't offer pity. I wouldn't have accepted it if he did. "If this is what you say it is," Brooks said quietly, "she won't just go away for a few years. She's looking at federal mandatory minimums. The judge will revoke her bail immediately based on the hidden offshore assets." "Good," I said. I stood up. My knees popped. The fatigue was settling back into my bones, a deep, crushing wave of exhaustion. "We'll need you to sign an affidavit stating how you acquired these items," Brooks said, standing up with me. "You might be called to testify." "Draft it," I replied. "I'll sign whatever you want." 2 hours later, I walked out of the federal building. The October air was biting, but for the first time in a week, I didn't feel cold. I went straight to a cheap property management office on the edge of the industrial district. I didn't care about the neighborhood. I didn't care that the bars on the windows were rusted. I handed a tired-looking leasing agent $2,000 in cash from the white envelope. He didn't ask for a credit check. He just handed me a brass key. The apartment was a studio, no bigger than a 2-car garage. The linoleum floor was peeling in the corners. The refrigerator hummed with a violent rattling noise. It was beautiful. I drove to a discount store and bought an inflatable mattress, a cheap fleece blanket, and a bar of soap. That night, I locked the deadbolt. I turned on the shower. The water sputtered out, lukewarm and smelling faintly of copper. I stood under the spray until my skin turned red. I washed my hair 3 times. I watched the grime and the grease and the smell of the Walmart parking lot circle the drain and disappear. I inflated the mattress on the floor of the empty room. I wrapped myself in the cheap fleece blanket. I didn't have a pillow. I didn't care. I laid on my back, staring at the water stains on the ceiling. I listened to the rattling hum of the refrigerator. I closed my eyes. And for the first time in 7 days, I slept. Deep, dreamless, and heavy. The raid did not announce itself with sirens. There was no dramatic fanfare, no flashing lights tearing through the early morning fog. It happened with the quiet, terrifying efficiency of a professional execution. I was at my desk, staring at a spreadsheet that refused to balance. My office was a gray, windowless box, the kind of place where time goes to die. A notification popped up in the corner of my screen. Local news update. I didn't click it immediately. I took a slow sip of lukewarm coffee. I stared at the cursor, blinking, pulsing like a heartbeat, before I finally moved the mouse. The footage was grainy, filmed from a news helicopter hovering 300 feet above the suburban cul-de-sac. It was the house with the wide, manicured lawn where I had learned to ride a bike, the house that had been sold out from under me to pay for a criminal's freedom. Now, it was swarmed. 6 black SUVs were parked haphazardly on the grass. Men in tactical vests with FBI emblazoned on their backs were moving in a practiced, fluid formation. I didn't blink. I didn't gasp. I just watched. Then, they brought her out. Brittany didn't look like the woman who flew first class to Vegas or spent $10,000 on a handbag. She was wearing a gray, oversized sweatshirt and stained sweatpants, her hair pulled back into a messy, frantic knot. She wasn't fighting. She wasn't screaming. She was simply walking. Her head hung low, hands cuffed securely behind her back. She looked like she had just woken up from a nightmare, only to realize the nightmare was real. Behind her, standing on the front porch, were my parents. The camera caught my father gripping the wooden railing so hard his knuckles were white. He looked like he had aged a decade in a single week. My mother was standing right behind him, her hands clamped over her mouth, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. They didn't look like parents defending a daughter. They looked like two people who had just realized they had built their house on sand. My phone started buzzing. It vibrated against the laminate surface of my desk, a persistent, annoying sound. "Dad," I let it ring. It stopped, then immediately started again. "Mom," I didn't answer. I just watched the feed. The agents were ushering Brittany into the back of an SUV. One of the agents walked over to my father. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I saw my father's shoulders slump. I saw him reach out, as if to touch the agent's arm, and then pull back. The phone kept ringing. It was an assault. I picked it up, not to speak, but to watch the screen light up with their names. I let it cycle through mom, dad, until the voicemail kicked in. Then it started again. I finally swiped the green button. I didn't say a word. I just held the phone to my ear. "Chloe?" My mother's voice was a jagged, hysterical shriek. It wasn't the voice of someone worried about their daughter. It was the voice of someone who had just lost their leverage. "Chloe, please tell me you have it. Tell me you moved it. Tell me someone stole it from your car." I leaned back in my office chair. I watched the silent video feed on my monitor. The agents were pulling away now. The driveway was empty. "Moved what, Mom?" My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "The bag, the black gym bag," she screamed. I could hear sirens in the background, muffled and distant. They tore the house apart. They said they had new evidence. They said someone handed over a ledger and a hard drive. Did you look inside it? Did you leave it somewhere? Someone must have taken it from you. Nobody took it, I said. The line went dead quiet. All I could hear was her ragged, uneven breathing. For a second, I imagined her standing in that living room. The house they had stripped of everything that made it a home, now being picked apart by federal agents. "What do you mean?" she whispered. The hysteria was gone, replaced by a dawning, suffocating horror. "I mean, I handed it directly to Special Agent Brooks 3 days ago," I said. "I signed an affidavit. I told them exactly where she got the money. I told them everything. You gave it to them." Her voice broke. It was the sound of a woman watching her entire world collapse. "Chloe, she's your sister. She's your blood. And I'm your daughter," I replied. The words felt heavy, final, but that didn't stop you from selling the roof over my head. It didn't stop you from letting me sleep in a freezing parking lot while she slept in Egyptian cotton. You made your choice. I'm just making mine. "We had to pay her bail," she sobbed. "We had no choice. And now the lawyer just called. Because they have proof she was hiding offshore assets, the judge revoked her bond completely. She's not coming home, Chloe. She's going to federal prison. She belongs there. The bondsman, my father's voice suddenly cut in. He sounded hollowed out, like a shell of a man. Chloe, the bondsman put up $800,000. The collateral we used, our retirement accounts, the cash from Grandma Helen's house. Because she violated the terms of her bail by hiding the ledger, the bondsman keeps it. All of it. We're ruined, he croaked. We have nothing left. The bank is going to foreclose on this house by the end of the year. We're going to be homeless. I stared at the spreadsheet on my screen. I didn't feel sorry for them. I didn't feel glee either. I felt a profound, cold sense of balance. They had sacrificed me for her. Now, they were sacrificing themselves for the truth. You're strong, Dad, I said, using their own words against them. You're resourceful. You'll figure it out. Chloe, please. I have to get back to work, I said. I hung up. I didn't slam the phone. I just placed it down. I blocked their numbers. I blocked Brittany's number. I went into my settings and set a filter so any future messages from them would go directly to the trash, unseen and unread. I severed the rotting limb completely. The trial never happened. Faced with the mountain of evidence, Brittany's high-priced defense attorney advised her to take a plea deal. She pled guilty to 4 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of money laundering. The judge, citing her lack of remorse and the calculated nature of the cover-up, gave her 8 years. My parents lost the house in February. I didn't try to find out where they went. Sometimes the only way to survive a burning building is to walk out and never look back. It's been 6 months now. I still live in the tiny studio apartment. I bought a real bed, not an inflatable mattress. I bought a rug, a cheap thing that hides the scuffed floor. I have a plant on the windowsill. It's green, it's alive, and it needs very little attention. When I turn the deadbolt at night, it clicks shut. I am alone. But the walls aren't closing in anymore. The air is clear. I sit by the window and watch the city move beneath me. I don't look for them in the crowds. I don't listen for their voices. I am not the girl who sleeps in a car. I am not the girl who fixes houses for people who sell them out from under her. I am just Chloe. And for the first time, that is enough. Thank you so much for watching the final part of Chloe's story. The betrayal was deep, but that karma hit even harder. If you loved this deeply grounded family drama and the satisfying twist of poetic justice, please hit that like button right now. Share this video with anyone who knows that actions have consequences. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss our next intense, real-life story. Let us know in the comments, was Chloe right to do what she did? See you next time.